The world isn't black and white. There's no set path. No way you have to be. So why not do what you've been dreaming of? When you're stuck in someone else's story, write your own.
I was in a really unhealthy place in my life, working a job I didn't like, around people I didn't like, and I then started cooking as a means of self-care and healing. And I was noticing an extreme shift in my life, and as I was getting healthy, I really wanted to focus in on this shift and start sharing it with people around me. So I started cooking for friends, and I started hosting these massive dinner parties called seasonal tastings. And then people from all over Brooklyn started coming to these tastings, like 75 people for a dinner party. It was such a communal, beautiful, positive experience that I wanted to share with everyone.
What are we made of?
We're made of paint drips.
Sweat drops.
Dirty fingernails.
And clean cuts.
We can work from 9 to 5.
Start at midnight.
Or take the day off.
No timesheets.
No cubicles. No expense reports.
Because when they told us we could be anything we want to be,
We listened.
And as we chase after our dreams,
It doesn't matter what color our collars are.
Where we came from or where we're going. It matters what we're made of.
Homemade.
Handmade.
the point is, we're self-made.
every single one of us.
Every single one of us.
Every single one of us.
Opportunity is everywhere.
This could be fun.
It's a door.
Ooh, it's doing a lot of kicking down there.
Waiting to be open. Whatever your ambition, whatever your drive, whatever you're chasing, opportunity is everywhere.
Allowing companies to get away with this, classifying workers as independent contractors when they really should be classified as employees, is really a form of corporate welfare. It's allowing these companies to profit at the expense of workers, the public, our state and federal governments.
You have Silicon Valley on one side saying this is the best thing that ever happened, and you have like labor unions saying like this is the worst thing that ever happened. We're all going to work in sweatshops, and really what I found is that both things are true, and it depends who you are.
The nature of the gig economy.
I do Postmates sometimes when I'm really desperate, and that's about minimum wage, just because after you subtract gas and everything.
So I guess it would depend on the gig that you're booking and the industry that it's in.
So why would you pick gig work over a typical 9-to-5 job?
I've had some jobs out here working like at a regular job where I would report to that place like daily, and No, it was. I found out fast that was not for me.
Crate and Barrel made me go through 2 weeks of watching TV, like videos in the back of the store before they ever put me on the floor.
Short term, you have your own freedom, your own flexibility, you're your own boss, and that's great. But then long term, you don't get the benefits, and you're not a salary employee, and all those things that you kind of want to build up and save some money, stash away. It's a little bit harder to do that.
How stable is the gig economy and finding gigs?
Maybe there's not stability in the sense of like for sure where all your money's gonna be in that specific month or week or whatever it is, but I think especially in a market like LA or any bigger market, there's so much happening, and there's new apps that are coming up, there's new jobs that are being created.
It's sure but unsure, because like I said, you can have your whole week lined up with your gigs, and then next week it's hard to find a gig.
It is flexible, but with flexibility can come instability.
Here's your delivery, man.
Okay. Are those my drinks?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Did somebody order hamburgers?
They wait. In staffing agencies and on the streets, they get up before dawn to head out to factories to make your stuff. Temp workers, America's real gig economy. In the last dozen years, most job growth in the US has come not from full-time workers, but from temps. In Chicago, they live here, in Little Village and Cicero, which have majority immigrant populations, or in Englewood, a predominantly black neighborhood with 21% unemployment. They're people like 68-year-old Isabel Martinez, Tyshawn Campbell, who recently got out of prison, and Anna Perez, who says she's been waiting 3 years for workers. Temps do essential work for companies that drive the U.S. economy, but they're treated as second-class employees.
It's like we were kind of invisible and just a number, easily replaced.
To me, it was like more, they just felt like you was a machine. You know, like you weren't, sometimes like you weren't human.
Bueno, allí nos tratan como sus esclavos.
Companies are making huge profits because the labor which they use is precarious staffing, temp labor.
There's a growing awareness that this industry has problems. This year, the Illinois House and Senate passed a bill that would increase protections for temporary workers. It's awaiting the governor's signature. Still, the United States has some of the weakest temp worker labor protections in the developed world. And the instability of temp work feeds back into communities across the country, like Little Village, Cicero, and Englewood.
Now, what a lack of work does in the community, it means a lack of economic stability, a lack of resources. Now, you're not bringing in any money, so it affects your family. That's why you have such a high crime rate, high drugs, gangs, everything. When you have a people that are being deprived of the ability and opportunity to work and to do something positive with their life, what do you think is going to happen?
They don't want what we know out there. They sell hamburgers, but they buy real estate, so they pay no taxes. You know, this guy Bezos, well, he's $16 billion. How much tax did they pay on that $16 billion? Zero. When I came back from Vietnam in '73, my poor dad said, "Get your MBA," and my rich dad laughed. It's just because you're going to turn out to be an employee. Who else hires guys with MBAs? You know what I mean? Social Security is broke, pensions are broke, the students are broke. You know, they're screwing everybody with debt. This is called, not economics, this is called bubblenomics. But they'll never teach you this in school.
And why do they keep printing money? Because they want to save something.
Because it's an addiction. You know, this is like heroin. The moment you take that one hit, they say, okay, I'll quit next week. And the economy gets worse, so they go, Trump gave us a tax cut in America. This thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what happened in 2008, they stopped it by printing money. So they call it the Great Recession. But they didn't really fix anything. You know, derivatives went from 700 trillion to 1.2 trillion today, twice as much. And that is net, you know, doesn't tell the whole story. So when the recession hit, the PhD standard came in. That was Bernanke, you know, and then Yellen. The PhD said, they have PhDs. Well, it's no different than long-term capital, LTCM. They had Nobel Prize winners, people like my poor dad, academics, you know. This is what's going on in the world economy today. So the baby boomers are going to retire now. Student loans are bust. So do you have to be an economist to say what's going to happen? We're fighting a 12-year war now. Entitlements are going through the roof. National debt to GDP is 109 in America, 109%. 90% is too late. We have to keep printing now. So this is called bubblenomics, and this is what's going to happen.
Scary stuff.
It's happened throughout history.
I want you to listen to this. Our scientists now tell us that we are in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. In the next 7 decades, we could lose over half the species of life that now inhabit this planet. I'm going to tell you, we are really, really scared. So what do? We create a completely new economic system. From markets to networks, consumerism to sustainability, ownership to access, market capital to social capital. How do we create a distributed nervous system to ensure against the dark net prevailing? None of this is being taught in the schools, by the way.
What are the ingredients for an industrial revolution? Take some new energy sources, add a dash of cutting-edge communications technology, and top it all off with an emerging mode of transportation. When our society goes through an industrial revolution, we spur economic growth and completely change the world we live in. We've seen the effects of 2 already. So, how would things change if we had a third?
Exploding across all of the domain of services, from dog walkers to on-demand physicians.
It's the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century.
Is it going to go away? Is it going to get bigger and transform, or even spell the end of capitalism?
An externalization of risk onto this population, so that instead of just flexibility and independence, we're also getting extreme disruption.
Many people don't even care that it's the sharing economy anymore. They just think it's a better way to do things.
We've been talking about the sharing economy for over a decade, and even in the face of regulatory backlash, it shows few signs of slowing down. alternative forms of employment, characteristic of the gig economy, have become so mainstream, few of us think twice about hopping into a stranger's car or even inhabiting someone else's home, thanks to the mobile apps that connect us. What forces continue to power the sharing economy, and how has it changed all these years later?
The fundamental principle of the sharing economy is actually based on economic efficiency.
It will allow you to dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain.
The idea is that there's all these assets in the world that are underutilized.
Think about apartments, think about cars, many other things.
Energy, value, people's skills, people's time, money.
If you think about a car today, a car is used 5% of the time, 95% of the time, it's not used. And actually, it uses valuable space in our cities because it's parked somewhere.
And what technology does is it enables us to unlock the value of those assets and make it liquid through networks and marketplaces.
Theoretically today, we would be able to run a city such as New York or Paris or London or Singapore or Turin, a bigger city or a smaller city, with just a fraction of the cars we have today. I really think there's two key enablers about the sharing economy. And the first is about real-time information in our pockets, but then the other thing is data. I would say data is the glue behind the sharing economy.
So it's interesting to me, the conversation about the sharing economy today, because I wrote my book in 2009. Companies that we now sort of see as the poster children for the sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber, how fast they were able to grow, because traditional industries just didn't see them as a threat. I think one of the things that is different is, have they become too big?
In cities around the world, local populations do worry that they have indeed become too big, and in the case of home sharing, have banded together to restrict these activities within their communities. How might regulation protect their interests without stifling innovation?
You know what's interesting is, I don't think one country's got the regulatory approach to this right.
And like it always happens when you got new technologies, then we need a little bit of time in order to adjust to them, to create new policies.
You see best practices in different parts of the world.
It doesn't make sense that if you need to get a car, you need to look at 10 or 20 different apps. At the same time, we want to make sure that the people pay taxes when they rent their apartments.
In the UK, for example, Osborne implemented this new tax law that the first £5,000 that you earned off shared assets, whether that was renting out your driveway, renting out your home, would be subject to a different tax structure. And this was really interesting because it actually created an incentive for people to declare what they were earning off these platforms.
It depends on what firms do, it depends on what NGOs do, it depends on what policy do, but it is a critical requirement that we build systems that reincorporate the social into the economic.
The important thing is that still we have a very powerful force in order to make our cities more sustainable and more social.
But it's still very early days in terms of regulation.
In China, where the government has named the sharing economy a national priority, it has been able to thrive like nowhere else. Although some experts warn a correction is on the horizon, in 2016 the Chinese sharing economy reportedly accounted for over $500 billion in transactions.
Platforms that have been difficult to crack in other parts of the world, peer-to-peer rental of goods is booming in China. It's partly because there's real problems to solve.
To me, China is the biggest potential market for the sharing economy in the world, bigger than the United States for sure.
You move through that early adoption phase pretty quickly in China, and then it's a hockey stick growth that we just don't see in other parts of the world.
You can share a basketball for 15 cents an hour. Need to charge your phone? There's a power bank share for that. And then came the shared beds, which many called napping pods.
I think also in China there is a different relationship between individual ownership and shared access to things. People wanting the benefit of products and services versus needing to own them outright has really gained traction.
This more flexible notion of ownership can be observed more widely and certainly beyond Asia. What does this shift in thinking mean for individual ownership?
It's not the end of individual ownership. There's many categories of assets where people will not share them because there is not the incentive or there is too much friction to sharing them.
Don't get too excited when people tell you you'll be able to have a new app that will allow you to share umbrellas or a drill. There's some things where it doesn't make sense. As much, even if you use it very little, some objects in your home, it still makes sense to own it because their cost is not that much.
So goods that you use on a daily basis. There's also many goods where there is still an immense stigma attached to sharing, so clothes for many people.
But for other more substantial pieces of urban infrastructure, there we can really make a dent.
I think what we're seeing is a shift in attitudes towards what ownership really means and the relationship between ownership and identity.
So the concept of sharing economy is not new. We've seen it around for a few years now, but what is happening is that little by little is moving into new dimensions.
So my parents' generation, what they owned, the car they drove around in, the brands that they wore, was one of the fundamental expressions of their identity and their status.
So that becomes another way to show our values and to show status.
So I prefer the term sort of digital social identity versus digital footprint, and that's where I think people are trying to reconcile what is their true self.
So if you look at the future, we might have a future where we'll be able to be conspicuous, but without physical consumption.
And here is where they all come together.
You're a thinker, hello, a tastemaker, and a very important business person.
I was instantly struck by a beautiful vision.
A layer of magic.
It's on your internet. It's on your pocket telephone.
Friendship is magic.
Image sliders, parallax scrolling, data moving in and out.
Well, what happens now?
Hold that thought.
You boost.
This is how it works.
This is how it works.
Let me show you how it works.
It's time to go. Let's see how I'm getting home tonight.
Mobility managers use advanced analytics to combine Ben's trip history, current circumstances, data from millions of other commuters, and information from different modes of travel across the city to provide a set of tailored, seamless options. Payment providers allow Ben to pay by the mile. Insurance companies deliver customized per-trip insurance that accounts for Ben's particular route and mode of transit.
I need groceries. I can pick them up at the station and then take a pod home. But I can still get some exercise by biking to the train.
City planners work with the private sector to operate and maintain critical infrastructure, from bike racks to train platforms. Physical assets are increasingly smart and connected, allowing constant, real-time monitoring.
Perfect timing. And I don't even need to take my phone out of my pocket to board.
Digital infrastructure suppliers provide ubiquitous, high-speed connectivity for a smooth and secure online experience.
Milk, eggs, bread, ice cream? Yeah, why not?
Retailers and logistics providers enable nearly on-demand provisioning of products to Ben.
Well, I got my groceries. Now I just need to grab a pod, and I can catch a bit of the game.
Fleet operators store, maintain, and deploy shared autonomous vehicles throughout the city. Vehicle manufacturers build an array of shared self-driving options to meet the varying needs of Ben and the millions of other travelers. Content providers offer a variety of options, from entertainment to business applications, each supported by advertisers and subscription fees.
Wow, that was fast. Now I just check the fare summary, grocery bill, rate the trip, and it's time to relax.
We have to change consciousness. We have to move from a geopolitical, ideological frame to biosphere consciousness in order to have the narrative and the vision and the determination and the will and the drive to move ahead instead of, through fear, backing up to the 20th century.